Hello guys, today is another day and more good news for Ukraine, and however some bad news for Russia and also some bad news for Ukraine as well. Let's go straight into the news. America has finally agreed to send the MARS systems to Ukraine. This has been a request from President Zelensky. He wanted these missile launchers, but finally President Biden has agreed to send these multi-rocket launcher systems to Ukraine, and here they are coming. And very soon they will land into Ukraine. We are likely to see the tables turning. We are likely to see the battlefront become hotter and hotter. These systems that are being sent by the United States are not the best that they have. These ones that they are sending can reach a distance of 60 miles. What does this mean for Ukraine to get those that can reach 300 miles? It means Ukraine will now start bombing inside Russia. As a result, Russia will likely to activate the nuclear defense. According to the treaty that was ratified in 2010, Russia can activate its nuclear weapons and even use them if any aggressive nation start to attack Russia into its own mainland. So it means if Ukraine use these long-distance missile launchers that can reach the inner parts of Russia, it means Russia will be prompted or provoked to activate its nuclear defense treaty. And we are likely to see a major escalation here because Russia has the doctrine that states that it should defend itself. And as we know, Putin has been threatening for a long time to use nuclear weapons, and we are waiting to see what will be the response of Russia since these long-distance missile launchers are already on their way to Ukraine. The most probable deployment for these multi-launcher systems will be in Kharkiv. That will be to defend Kiev, as also to target Russian supply lines that are from the north. Obvious, Kharkiv is the best location because it is at proximity to the Russian border, and the supply lines for Russia are very close to Kharkiv. However, Ukraine is not going to get a large number of them. Possibly the figures are saying Ukraine will get 20. However, Ukraine was asking for almost 300 of them, but the United States is not prepared to deliver such a large quantity of such aggressive missile launchers to Ukraine. So we are waiting to see the package that they will get and how effective it will be for them to use them, because they will need ample time for the Ukrainian troops to be trained to use these new systems, and also for Ukraine to integrate these new systems into their own defense systems so that they can be used effectively. It's a good development, that's good news to Ukraine, but we are waiting to see how far this can take them along the battle lines, and also what will be the response from Russia if these multi-rocket launchers are delivered to Ukraine. And there are some confirmations that the supply line is already in Poland. So we are waiting to see when they can touch down in Ukraine, when they can be implemented on the battlefield, how effective will they be used, and what will be the progress along the battle lines, because Russia is on the offensive. Russia is gaining more and more ground. Severodonetsk is almost falling. Lysychansk is also under threat. Seversk is also under threat. Popasna has been occupied and Russia is consolidating its ground. However, around Kherson, there is little happening there. Russia moved most of its troops to the eastern side where it is concentrated at the moment, and there's a lot of fighting around the eastern side. But around Kherson, Ukraine is pulling some offensive, but yesterday they were pushed back. Ukraine has the best chance to attack right now because there are only few troops that are remaining to just defend, not for offensive. Most of the troops have been moved from Kherson, from Zaporozhye, from Popasna, and they have been moved to Severodonetsk, where the major offensive is, and also to the north around Izium, around Liman. There are some new offensive. There are also some new offensive lines around Kharkiv region, and Russia is also gaining some ground there. Yesterday they captured 2 more settlements there, and we are likely to see more expansions around Kharkiv region. And this expansion around Kharkiv region is a threat because Russia will be pushing towards Kiev. Russia also controls the highway, which means their supply lines are also secured and they can move their supplies without much difficulties. These are new developments. Russia is on the offensive. Ukraine is retreating. We are waiting to see what else will be happening around this area. With Russia further moving to the east, we are likely to see them occupying more of these villages to the east of the Kharkov region. And we are waiting to see how far the offensive will be, because here around the Kharkiv region, there are few battalions of the Russian forces that are located here. Most of them have been moved to the eastern region, that is the Severodonetsk area, where they are more determined to take over that area. So we are waiting to see what will happen today, tomorrow, and also as Ukraine is expecting to receive missile launchers from the United States. So definitely, or more probably, they will be located around the Kharkov region, and we are waiting to see how the front lines will change around this region. Around Izium, Russia continues with the offensive, and they have further expanded or continued to occupy the area. Today they have moved into the woodlands further south, and we can see that they have now occupied the woodlands further south, which means they are taking more and more ground. Yes, of course, they are woodlands, but they are very important to the Russian forces to provide them with cover that they need. And if Russia continues to occupy more and more ground, we are likely to see them reaching Slovansk very soon. And also more villages around Yarova, Donetsk, they are under threat from the approaching Russian forces. Also, Izium is a strategic point for the Russian forces. They need this region to secure their supply lines. We can see the different highways that lead to the north. They lead straight to the Russian border, and Russia uses these highways to supply their front lines with the weapons that are coming from Russia. And also this highway, it leads to Kharkov region. It is a strategic win for the Russian forces to consolidate this area, because they also secure their front line with supplies as well. So these successful attacks around Izium will mean that Russia is now aiming around Slovansk. They want to capture this city, but they are still far from Slovansk, especially from the direction of Izium, but they are very close from the direction of Liman. They are just a few miles away, about 7.4 miles, which means their rocket launchers can easily reach this area from the direction of Liman, even without crossing the Slovansk Donetsk River. But we are waiting to see how long it will take them to reach Slovansk. But it is still a long distance, especially from Izium. But around Izium, there is little resistance, because Ukrainian troops have deserted this area and they are retreating further south. The only savior that can protect Slovansk is the Severodonetsk River, because the Russian forces are hesitating to cross this river. And also, most of the crossing points around this area have been destroyed by the Ukrainian forces. And we have seen the Russian forces remaining to the north of the Severodonetsk River for several days up to now. They are very cautious about crossing and also moving further to the south. So we are likely to see some more offensive coming from the southern part, that is from Popasna, going forward to the north to join up this area. And as we can see here, there are some attacks and even missile strikes around Slovansk that are coming from both directions, from the north and from the south. Now moving on to the Severodonetsk region, thankfully today my map can now show that the area, part of the city, is occupied by the Russian forces. Unlike yesterday, my map was not updating to show that Russia now controls this area. This area that is occupied by Russia is the key area of the city. It occupies the largest buildings, so which means Russia has now managed to capture the most compact area of the city, that is this area. And these areas are like low density suburbs, few buildings, more parks, so it will not be that difficult for Russia to move through these areas. And also this one is industrial hub with so many railway lines, we are not likely to see much offensive from the Ukrainian side. What we are hearing is that Ukraine has deserted this area for some time, and we are likely to see Russia just completing the takeover of this area. And Ukraine has already blown these bridges, these crossing lines. They are already blown up. So it means Ukraine may have crossed over to Lysychansk already. But some reports are saying that some Ukrainian troops are still trapped around Severodonetsk after these crossing points have been blown up. And one of the crossing points that is still standing is around this area, but the bridge is littered with holes and it's no longer safe to cross with heavy equipment. So if troops can cross the bridge, but they will leave behind their armor, so which will be a big loss to them because they are already in short of armor. They will leave behind a lot of armor, which will be a disadvantage to their fighting frontline forces. We are likely to see Lysychansk being bombarded heavily. Already there are signs of bombardment around Lysychansk, but this is a heavily built up area, and we don't know if the Russian forces will cross the Severodonetsk and when they will cross the Severodonetsk, or the Russian forces will attack from the south, that is from around Popasna, going forward to reach Lysychansk, and also they will be joining this area to complete the encirclement of the Ukrainian forces that are trapped, that will be trapped around this area. So it's now a difficult puzzle how the Russian forces will navigate this, because here they are trapped by the Severodonetsk River. From the south, we are seeing some major offensive from the Ukrainian forces that are attacking from different directions around Popasna, and they have managed to push back the Russian forces back to Popasna. So this highway is still open for Ukrainian forces to use, but it's not safe because it's very close. Popasna is a high ground. Russian forces can easily attack the supply lines from this direction. So Ukraine need to clear this whole area from Russian forces, but is that easy? It's not easy at all. So the back and forth around this area of Popasna continues, but there is a good number of battalions around this area. We are likely to see some strong resistance from the Russian side, but also some major offensive from the Ukrainian side. So the control of this area is very significant, especially for the Russian forces who are trapped north of the Severodonetsk River. They now need to use the southern flank and also the eastern flank to complete the surrounding of the Severodonetsk region. Now let's move to Mykolaiv. In this area, previously, Ukrainian forces launched a successful counterattack along the M14 highway, and that saw the Ukrainian forces taking up a big chunk of the road leading to Kherson. But as of today, we can see that the Russian forces have managed to push back the Ukrainian forces and consolidate their ground around this area. From this region, we are not likely to see much fighting taking place because there are few battalions of the Russian forces that are located in this area. Most of the forces were shifted from this area of Kherson to the south and Mykolaiv and transferred to the Popasna and also moved to the Severodonetsk region and also to around Liman to the north, where fighting is very intense. So this region, we are not likely to see much fighting or intense fighting taking place. Ukraine will likely use some missile strikes just to keep the Russian forces in their positions and consolidate their positions without major offensives. So from this southern region, we are not likely to see much fighting taking place because Russian forces have few battalions located in this area. So this area, we are likely to see more stalemates for the longest period of time. maybe until there is more development or more deployment from the eastern region to reoccupy this area with more forces, then we are likely to see more fighting taking place. But as of now, it's almost of a stalemate, back and forth. Yesterday it was Ukraine on the offensive, and today Russia on the offensive. So the front lines are preserved as we speak, but we are seeing more missile strikes, especially on the from the Russian side around this area. Now let's look at the deployment map to see how the two countries have deployed their troops and where they are concentrated, where there is less, where there are high chances of takeover or possibly handover territories. So from this map we can see that around Kherson and also facing Mykolaiv, there is little presence of the Russian forces in this. The blue ones are the Ukrainian forces. There is a heavy presence of the Ukrainian forces and a few battalions of the Russian forces, and even around Zaporozhye. This is because Russian forces have shifted most of their troops from the southern side to the eastern side. That this is Severodonetsk, and also this is around Liman, and also around Popasna, this region. There is heavy presence of the Russian forces. They are fighting hard. They want to complete the takeover of the Luhansk region. So we are not likely to see much fighting from the south, especially for the Russian side. And also we have some forces here around Crimea, but these are more of reserve forces that are waiting for the counter, especially around this area of Kherson. So it's a stalemate around Kherson. Russia is not much onto the offensive, but Ukraine is trying hard to bring down this blockade around Kherson. They want to retake over this area. Around Popasna, we can see that there are also moderate presence of Russian forces, but of course the Ukrainian forces are also surrounding this area, and they are guarding against the offensives of the Russian forces. This highway is still clear, and also this highway is also still clear for the Ukrainian forces to use, but they cannot go beyond this area, which is occupied by Russia at the moment. And around Severodonetsk region and also Lysychansk, we can see we have several battalions of the Russian forces that are located here. And as I've mentioned, that this area, the built-up area, is already occupied by the Russian forces. So the Ukrainian forces are more on the retreat, and the Russian side are more on the offensive in this area, and they are taking more and more ground in this area. We are likely to see a complete takeover of the Severodonetsk area, and very soon the heat will be turned on Lysychansk. So we are likely to see more missile strikes around Lysychansk to complete the takeover of this area. But this region, like I've said before, that the troops around Liman and also Izium to the north, they are trapped by the Severodonetsk river, so they cannot cross over to strike or to even to invade Slovansk and Siversk region. So the strategy here, the best strategy for the Russian forces will be to use the southern flank and also the eastern flank. But the eastern flank will not go much because the Severodonetsk river crosses this area. So they can manage to complete the takeover of the Severodonetsk area, but they cannot cross over to Lysychansk because Lysychansk is on the southern side of this big river. So it means the remaining option will be to move these forces from this direction to come to Popasna and also start the offensive from the southern side going forward to the north. But we are not sure which strategy the Russian forces will take. We are waiting to see how this battle will proceed. And this is around Izium. We have a good number of Russian battalions, but also this is the Ukrainian front line. We have several battalions of the Ukrainian front line, but even though there is some heavy presence of the Ukrainian forces are more on the retreat as they are being pushed further down by the Russian forces, and very soon we are likely to see the Russian forces getting to Slovansk area. And going forward to Kharkiv region, we can see heavy presence of the Ukrainian forces. They control this area, the Ukrainian forces. And this region is quite confusing. It's not so clear who controls this region. On some maps, they show that Ukraine control a small part that link to the border with Russia. But on some maps, they show that Russia controls this region. So we are not so sure which division controls this area. But we are likely to see more fighting happening around this area because Russia will try to cover most of its borders from the Ukrainian side. But the battle is still continuing. More fighting is going forward. We will see how the battle lines will shape in the coming days, and the war is progressing.